All right, good morning and welcome everyone. I'm Jesse Mechling, the Director of Education at the Center for Coastal Studies in Provincetown, and this is Facebook Live. Um, Here we had a holiday weekend. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're joining me from someplace else, I hope you had a nice weekend. So at the center, we've actually decided that we will be going back in a little bit in a few weeks to the office. So I'm going to continue with my series for another 2 weeks. This week is going to be an encore version of cool marine animals that I have seen in light of this new development of not going back to the office for a few more weeks. So I've decided to do one more week. This week's theme, if it has a theme, are all species that are listed as endangered that I have seen, although many of the other species I have seen are also listed as endangered. This week's theme are all encore theme is all endangered species. So we'll start with an animal that I've only seen once. It's pretty impressive when you see it. You cannot forget it. It's an animal that is a common visitor here on Cape Cod, and one is that is often mistaken for another common visitor here at Cape Cod and other parts of the world. That is much different type of similar type of animal, but much different in its feeding behavior. Um, it is the second largest fish in the world, and of course, I'm speaking about the basking shark. So let's start with today's animal. So the basking shark is the second largest fish in the world. Um, it is listed as endangered, as all our species will be this week. It gets its name from their propensity to, during feeding, their behavior to hang out at the surface while they're swimming and filtering out the plankton that they eat. And it looks like they're actually basking in the sun, where their name comes from. Many myths and legends surround this animal, and the sea serpent myths. Inevitably, a lot of them around the world most likely turn out to be dried up basking sharks. Um, so this species is a cosmopolitan migratory species found in all the world's temperate oceans. It lives along the continental shelf and actually even occasionally enters brackish waters. It's found from the surface down to at least 910 meters or 2,900 feet, almost 3,000 feet, and prefers water temperatures 8 to 14 degrees Celsius or 46 to 58 degrees Fahrenheit. I have to say that there are other animals that prefer, like the mantas and whale sharks. The water temperature is more to my liking than the basking sharks. The basking shark is one of the few species that lives in temperate latitudes, both in the northern and southern hemisphere, but not in the two zones in the tropics. Scientists believe that individuals in these two zones are all the same species, and they migrate from these zones down to from the northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere, vice versa, underwater in the deep sea, without ever coming to the surface and without ever being observed. In fact, studies of tag sharks here in Cape Cod found that some of the sharks swam down and the tag recorded them off the coast of Brazil. So the basking shark is the second largest fish in the world, only behind the whale shark, another animal in our series. They typically reach lengths of 6 to 8 meters or 20 to 26 feet and weigh between 2,900 and 5,800 kilograms or 6,500 pounds and 13,000 pounds. The largest, most accurate measurement of a basking shark was 12.27 meters or 40.3 feet, and it weighed an estimated 16 tons. The basking shark shape is similar to that of a great white, and the two are often sometimes confused with each other, especially when the dorsal fin is present, as it is in this image here. Just recently, I know off the coast of Spain, there was an image of a shark along the water that turned out to be a basking shark. But closer looks at these sharks will reveal that they are very different when you see them in the water. It's usually just from the surface, if you see a dorsal, that they are sometimes confused. Basking sharks have huge mouths, up to 1 meter, 3 feet, 3 inches in width, and longer and more obvious gill slats than great whites that nearly encircle the head. You can see from this picture these large gill slats. And then they're accompanied by well-developed gill rakers. You can see here this large mouth. They also have a more of a pointy nose. And of course, when they're feeding, it's much different to a great white. Similar to whale sharks and megamouth sharks, basking sharks have hundreds of small teeth, but they don't use them. They are filter feeders. They filter zooplankton, very small fish, and other invertebrates from the water with their gill rakers by swimming forwards with their mouth open. And a 5 meter long, 16-foot basking shark has been calculated to filter up to 450 tons of water per hour, swimming at a relatively low speed. As with, believe it or not, as with other planktonic feeders like the North Atlantic right whale, one of the animals we talked about, they're not indiscriminate, meaning they don't just swim with their mouth open every day, all the time with food that comes in. They will actually look for rich patches of food, just as North Atlantic right whales do. They search out these patches, and samples taken of feeding individuals recorded plankton, zooplankton density 75% higher compared to adjacent areas that where these animals were not feeding, non-feeding areas. So these animals are not, as with North Atlantic right whales, they search out high density of these small invertebrates to feed on. These animals are usually solitary, but during summer months, they can aggregate in groups and some groups reportedly up to 100 individuals have been reported. And they will congregate in areas where there are dense patches of zooplankton, where they will also engage in different social behaviors. This is similar to the other one of the other plankton eating animals we have here on Cape Cod, the North Atlantic right whale, where they will congregate in large numbers when the food is in high density. The age of maturity of these animals is thought to be between the ages of 6 and 13, and at a length of 4.6 to 6 meters, or 15 to 20 feet. Breeding is thought to take place every 2 to 4 years. Basking sharks, like many of the large shark species, are oviviparous, meaning their eggs hatch internally and the young are born live when fully developed. Gestation of these animals is thought to be over a year, perhaps even 2 to 3 years. And as opposed to whale sharks, which give birth to hundreds of small babies, basking sharks give birth to only a few quite large babies. And in fact, based on the minimum size of individuals observed in the wild, they can give the individuals they give birth to are the largest of all shark species, slightly larger than babies of great whites. The exact lifespan of these animals is not known, but experts estimate it to be around 50 years. But with new research telling us that great whites live to be 70 years, it's possible that these very large, slow-moving sharks can live longer than 50. It's just that the information, there's very little known despite their large size. There's very little known about these animals. So it's certainly possible that these large animals can certainly live to be longer than 50s, given the new information on other sharks, such as great whites living to be up to 70 years old. And as with all animals listed this week, this is an endangered species. These animals were historically targeted for liver oil. Their livers can actually constitute up to 15 or 25% of their body weight. It was once considered a nuisance along the Canadian coast and was a target of an eradication program. Although for the life of me, I can't figure out how a plankton-eating shark is considered to be a nuisance. But that was a different time. And while they're no longer hunted directly for their meat, they are still hunted for their fins. They are very large, and their fins are very large, and they are still hunted in the shark fin trade around the world for shark fin soup in China. They're also vulnerable to fishing gear entanglements, ship strikes, um, and um, and being caught as bycatch. Of all the shark species, the basking shark appears one of the sharks to be most vulnerable to human impacts. Characteristics making them vulnerable include their late age of maturity, as we talked about, 6 and 13 years, long gestation periods, possibly up to 2 to 3 years, low productivity, so they only have a few pups at each time, and their range overlaps with many commercial fisheries in coastal nearshore habitats. In addition, they spend a lot of their time at the surface, making them vulnerable to ship strikes. And of course, they're just naturally small populations. So these animals face many threats in the ocean, mainly from human impacts, very similar to the North Atlantic right whale, due to their longevity, their low number of pups that are born, and the fact that they live very close to shore in highly dense areas of human activity. So that is all for today. This is a lovely photograph taken by our aerial survey team of a basking shark just the other day or the other week. So that's all for our series today. Another cool animal. I hope that you all will join me again tomorrow for another cool marine animal that I have seen, encore edition. So tomorrow we'll be back with another endangered species. So I hope you all will stay safe, stay healthy. Please join me tomorrow and have a great day. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.